The ocean is black, almost invisible, as if the world itself has been swallowed by night. It is just past midnight on November 1st, 1943, off the coast of Bougainville Island. The air is thick with humidity, and the silence feels wrong, like something is waiting. Then, without warning, the horizon flickers. A dull orange flash. Then another. Within seconds, the quiet ocean erupts into chaos. Heavy naval guns roar, tearing the darkness apart. Shells scream overhead.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
Water explodes into towering columns. Somewhere in that darkness, ships are maneuvering, firing, dying. And if you were standing on one of those decks, gripping cold steel, you wouldn't know where the next shot would come from. You would only know one thing. This fight is going to decide who controls this part of the Pacific. The place is Empress Augusta Bay, on the western side of Bougainville, the largest island in the northern Solomon Islands chain. It is far from the headlines of Europe, far from the deserts of North Africa. But here, in this remote stretch of ocean and jungle, a critical battle is about to unfold. The Americans are pushing north. The Japanese are trying to hold what remains of their defensive line, and both sides understand that this bay, this quiet, curved coastline, could change the entire direction of the war in the Pacific. The operation begins before the gunfire. Hours earlier, U.S. Marines and Army troops are already moving toward the beaches near Cape Torokina. The plan is bold. Land troops secure a beachhead and build airfields that can threaten the massive Japanese base at Rabaul. It is a dangerous gamble. Intelligence suggests thousands of Japanese troops are somewhere on Bougainville. The jungle is dense, the terrain unknown, and the enemy is experienced. But the U.S. command, under Admiral William "Bull" Halsey, knows they cannot wait. They need a foothold, and they need it now. As the first landing craft approach the shore in the early hours of November 1st, the sea is calm, but tension is not. The men inside those boats are silent. Some grip rifles, others stare into the darkness ahead. The only sounds are the engines and the slap of waves against metal hulls. Then, suddenly, naval guns from U.S. destroyers and cruisers open fire toward the shore. The bombardment is meant to soften defenses, but no one knows exactly what is waiting in the jungle beyond the beach. When the ramps drop and the first boots hit the sand at Torokina, there is no massive wall of gunfire, no immediate counterattack, just the eerie quiet of a place that feels abandoned. But the silence is not comforting, it is unsettling. Because experienced soldiers know that in this war, quiet often means something worse is coming. By dawn, thousands of American troops are landing. Bulldozers follow, carving paths through the sand. Supplies begin to pile up. The beachhead grows, but out at sea, something is already moving toward them. The Japanese Navy has detected the landings, and they are not going to let this go unchallenged. Back at their stronghold in Rabaul, one of the most heavily fortified bases in the Pacific, Japanese commanders react quickly. Vice Admiral Sentaro Omori is given the task. His mission is clear. Take a force of cruisers and destroyers, sail south through the night, and smash the American landing force before it can secure itself. If he succeeds, the beachhead will collapse. The invasion will fail, and Bougainville will remain in Japanese hands. Omori's force is powerful. It includes heavy cruisers like Myoko and Haguro, ships armed with massive 8-inch guns capable of tearing apart lighter vessels. Alongside them are light cruisers and several destroyers, fast and aggressive. These are not inexperienced crews. Many have been fighting since the early days of the war. They know night combat. They know these waters, and they believe they have the advantage. But the Americans are not blind. Radar has changed the nature of naval warfare. And on the U.S. side, Rear Admiral Aaron S. Merrill commands Task Force 39. His ships, light cruisers like USS Cleveland, USS Columbia, USS Montpelier, and USS Denver, are supported by destroyers, are equipped with advanced radar systems. This technology allows them to see the enemy in darkness, long before visual contact. It is a quiet advantage, but in a night battle, it can mean everything. As the Japanese force moves toward Empress Augusta Bay, the night becomes tense. Both sides are searching. Both sides know a clash is coming, but neither knows exactly when or where. At around 2:30 a.m. on November 2nd, radar screens on American ships begin to show contacts, blips, multiple targets closing fast. The distance shrinks. The crews prepare. Orders are passed quietly. Guns are loaded. Torpedoes are readied. The men on deck feel it in their bones. This is the moment. Then, just after 2:45 a.m., the battle begins. American destroyers move first, launching torpedoes into the darkness. These weapons slice through the water, invisible and deadly. Seconds later, cruiser guns open fire. The night explodes again, this time with even greater intensity. Flashes from gun muzzles light up the sea. The sky flickers with each salvo. The Japanese are caught off guard, but not for long. They return fire, their heavy guns thundering back across the water. Shells land dangerously close to American ships. The sea churns violently, as if it is alive. Confusion quickly sets in. Ships maneuver hard to avoid torpedoes and incoming fire. Formations break, orders overlap. In the darkness, it becomes difficult to tell friend from enemy. At one point, Japanese ships nearly collide with each other. A destroyer is hit and begins to burn. Another is crippled. But the Americans are pressing their advantage. Their radar allows them to track targets even when smoke and darkness hide them from view. They adjust their fire with precision. Salvo after salvo finds its mark. The heavy cruiser Haguro fires back fiercely, its guns lighting up the night. It manages to hit USS Denver, causing damage but not disabling it. The American ships continue to fight, maintaining pressure. Then comes a turning point. A Japanese light cruiser, Sendai, is caught in concentrated American fire. Shells rip into it again and again. Fires spread across the deck. The ship begins to lose speed. Within minutes, it is heavily damaged, drifting, and effectively out of the fight. Nearby, the destroyer Hatsukaze suffers a similar fate. It is struck, disabled, and left behind as the rest of the Japanese force tries to regroup. Admiral Omori faces a difficult decision. The battle is not going as planned. His force is disorganized, several ships are damaged, and he is not sure how many American ships he is facing. The darkness that once gave him confidence is now working against him. At around 4 a.m., he makes the call: withdraw. It is not a complete rout, but it is a clear setback. The Japanese force turns north, heading back toward Rabaul. Behind them, damaged ships are left in the water. Some will not make it. As dawn approaches, the sea begins to calm. The flashes fade. The roar of guns dies down. But the consequences of the battle are just beginning to take shape. For the Americans, the result is a success. They have protected the landing force at Torokina. The beachhead remains secure. Construction of airfields can continue, and that means something very important. They now have a base close enough to challenge Rabaul, the key Japanese stronghold in the region. But the fight is far from over. On land, the situation is still uncertain. Japanese troops are moving through the jungle, preparing counterattacks. The terrain is unforgiving. Thick vegetation limits visibility. Rain turns the ground into mud. Every step forward is a struggle. The Americans begin to dig in, building defensive positions around the beachhead. They know the enemy will come. It is only a matter of time. And above it all, the air war intensifies. Aircraft from both sides fill the skies. Bombers, fighters, reconnaissance planes. The new airfields at Torokina quickly become critical. From here, American planes can strike Rabaul, weakening its defenses and reducing its ability to launch further attacks. Back at sea, the aftermath of the naval battle continues to unfold. Rescue operations begin. Survivors cling to wreckage, waiting to be picked up. The ocean that was once filled with fire is now quiet again, but it holds the memory of what happened just hours before. For the Japanese, the failure to stop the landing at Empress Augusta Bay is a serious blow. It marks a shift. They are no longer able to easily disrupt American advances. The balance is changing, but the Japanese command is not ready to give up. Plans are already being made for further attacks. Reinforcements are being moved. The fight for Bougainville will continue for months, with intense ground combat, air raids, and naval engagements. And yet, that night battle, those few hours of chaos in the darkness, has already set the stage for what comes next. Because in war, sometimes a single night can decide the future of an entire campaign. As November turns into December, the beachhead at Torokina grows stronger. More troops arrive, supplies increase, airfields expand. What began as a risky landing is now becoming a permanent presence. Japanese forces attempt counterattacks in the following weeks, but they struggle to push the Americans back into the sea. The terrain, the growing strength of the U.S. position, and constant air pressure all work against them. The larger strategy is becoming clear. The Americans are not trying to capture every inch of territory. Instead, they are isolating key Japanese bases, cutting them off, and rendering them ineffective. Rabaul, once a powerful hub, is now under constant threat from the airfields at Bougainville. And it all traces back to that moment. That night. That clash in Empress Augusta Bay. If you stand there today, looking out over the calm water, it is hard to imagine what happened. There are no flashes, no explosions, no ships firing in the darkness, just the quiet sound of waves and wind. But history is still there, beneath the surface. Because on November 2nd, 1943, in the black waters off Bougainville, two fleets met in the dark. One was trying to stop an invasion. The other was determined to protect it. And when the guns fell silent, it was clear that the momentum of the Pacific War had shifted just a little more toward its final outcome. But to fully understand why this battle mattered so much, you have to zoom out, beyond the flashes of gunfire and the chaos of that night, and look at the wider map of the Pacific in late 1943. By this point in the war, the United States had already begun a steady push across the Solomon Islands. Guadalcanal had been secured months earlier, but the cost had been heavy. Every island taken required blood, planning, and time. Commanders knew they could not afford to fight every Japanese stronghold directly. They needed a smarter way forward. That strategy became known as island hopping. Instead of attacking the strongest points, American forces would bypass some heavily defended positions and focus on key locations that could support airfields and naval bases. Bougainville was one of those places. It was not chosen because it was easy. It was chosen because it was useful. From Cape Torokina, American aircraft could reach Rabaul, the main Japanese base in the South Pacific, and slowly shut it down. Rabaul itself was a fortress. It had airfields, naval facilities, and thousands of troops. For the Japanese, it was a critical hub that connected their defensive network. But it was also a problem. It was too strong to attack directly without massive losses, so instead of storming it, the plan was to isolate it, cut its supply lines, bomb it constantly, turn it into a base that could no longer function. And that is why Empress Augusta Bay mattered. It was not just a place on a map. It was a stepping stone, a quiet entry point that could open the door to something much bigger. On the ground at Torokina, engineers worked almost non-stop. Within days of the landing, construction of airstrips began. Men used bulldozers, shovels, and whatever tools they had to carve out runways from mud and jungle. It was exhausting work. The heat was intense. Rain came often. Supplies had to be moved carefully, but every hour counted. Because until those airfields were ready, the beachhead remained vulnerable. Japanese forces on the island were not sitting idle. Under Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake, the same commander who had led forces on Guadalcanal, plans were being made to push the Americans back. But there was a problem. Most of the Japanese troops were positioned on the eastern side of Bougainville, far from Torokina. Moving through the jungle was slow and difficult. The terrain itself became an obstacle. This delay gave the Americans time to build defenses, time to bring in artillery, time to expand their position. And time, in war, can be just as valuable as firepower. Meanwhile, the air war around Bougainville intensified even further. American carriers and land-based aircraft began launching repeated strikes against Rabaul. These were not small attacks. Waves of bombers, escorted by fighters, flew in to hit airfields, ships, and supply depots. The goal was simple: keep the Japanese off balance, prevent them from organizing a strong response. The Japanese tried to fight back. Fighters rose to intercept incoming raids. Anti-aircraft guns filled the sky with bursts of fire. But over time, the pressure began to show. Aircraft losses increased, supplies became harder to replace, and the once powerful base at Rabaul started to feel isolated. Back at Empress Augusta Bay, American naval forces remained alert. The victory in the night battle did not mean safety. There was always the risk of another Japanese attempt to break through. Destroyers patrolled the waters. On radar screens were watched carefully. Every contact, every signal, was taken seriously. One of the lessons learned from the battle was clear. Radar had changed everything. In earlier years of the war, night battles often favored the Japanese. Their training, their use of long-range torpedoes, and their experience gave them an edge. But now, with radar guiding American ships, that advantage was fading. The ability to detect and engage targets in darkness without visual contact was a turning point. And yet, technology alone did not win the battle. Leadership played a role. Rear Admiral Merrill kept his forces organized under pressure. His decision to use radar effectively, to maintain coordinated fire, and to avoid unnecessary risks helped secure the outcome. On the other side, Admiral Omori faced confusion and uncertainty. In the darkness, with limited information, even experienced commanders can make difficult choices. The human element is always there, even in large battles. Every shell fired, every turn made by a ship, depends on people. Sailors loading guns, officers giving orders, engineers keeping engines running. And in those moments of chaos, small decisions can have large consequences. As weeks passed, the situation on Bougainville continued to develop. American forces expanded their perimeter, defensive lines were strengthened, supply routes became more stable. The initial fear of being pushed back into the sea began to fade. But the jungle never became easy. Patrols moved carefully through dense vegetation. Visibility was often limited to just a few meters. The sounds of insects, distant movement, and the constant presence of mud made every step uncertain. It was a different kind of battle compared to the open sea. Slower, quieter, but just as dangerous. Japanese counterattacks did come, especially later in November and into 1944. Some were determined and well organized, but by then the Americans had established strong defensive positions. Artillery, machine guns, and air support made it difficult for attacking forces to break through. The longer the Americans held Torokina, the stronger they became, and the weaker the Japanese position grew. Looking back, the Battle of Empress Augusta Bay is sometimes overshadowed by larger, more famous battles of World War II. It does not have the same recognition as Midway or Leyte Gulf, but its importance is undeniable. It was a key step in a larger plan, a moment where strategy, technology, and timing came together. It showed how control of the sea, even for a few hours in the dark, could shape events on land for months afterward. It showed how a successful landing, protected by naval forces, could open new paths forward. And it showed how the balance of power in the Pacific was slowly but steadily shifting. If you think about that night again, the flashes, the confusion, the ships moving through darkness, it becomes clear that it was more than just a battle. It was a transition, a point where one side began to lose its ability to stop the other. And for the men who were there, it was not about strategy or long-term plans. It was about survival, about doing their job in a moment of uncertainty, about trusting the ship, the crew, and the orders they were given. The ocean that night did not care about plans or maps. It only reflected the fire above it. And when the sun finally rose, it revealed the outcome: a beachhead still standing, a fleet that had held its ground, and a path forward that would continue, island by island, toward the final stages of the war. Because sometimes history does not turn with a single massive blow. Sometimes it shifts in the dark, in a place few people have heard of, during a battle that lasts only a few hours. And in Empress Augusta Bay, in November 1943, that shift had already begun.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.